Welcome to my breakdown of episode 7 of season 3 of the White Lotus. Who's got the killer instinct in this penultimate episode? As we see characters making some really dumb and irresponsible decisions, while some of them make no decisions at all. As Timothy continues to fantasize about death, we learn what Gary's dreams are about, and we finally find out who robbed the hotel. There's a lot that we've got to discuss in the second to last episode, so let's break it all down. Spoilers ahead. Now, we open with a quick glimpse into the Muay Thai fight that's seen throughout this episode and used as a backdrop to represent both the mental and physical battles that our main characters are going through. We transition back into following up with Rick and Frank at the Hollinger's house, as Jim introduces himself to Steve the director, who we see makes sure that Rick is doing okay and has his emotions under control. As they make some small talk and briefly talk about Jacqueline's show on television, and they discuss Steve's previous films, which includes some made-up trilogy, as Steve pivots into describing the movie and Shatala's role.
She is a former prostitute. She's very formidable because she knows all the secrets of all the most powerful men in Thailand. She's tough. She's brilliant. A knockout, obviously.
And she sings.
Now, after the misunderstanding of what Rick told Shatala, we see Frank requesting a whiskey to drink to help him through the process, even though we know he's been sober for almost a year. Meanwhile, we see Rick is trying to do his best and keeping his composure in line around Jim. Now, this is cut between the monk talking about how anyone is capable of killing someone, but how the Buddhist scripture is against every form of violence. You'll notice how the show has Lachlan, Gaitok, Mook, and Timothy on the screen when this is being said. To me, that was deliberate because I feel like all of them are hiding something, and I believe we're going to see all of them making a decision come the finale that no one would expect from them in a violent point of view. Now, the nighttime fun begins as Gaitok and Mook head out for their first date, and the Ratliff family make their way to Gary Greg's get-together, and we see Victoria couldn't be happier to being around the boat people again. We cut to Belinda, who's filled Zion in on everything about Greg, and he believes that they should accept his invite and see what he has to tell her.
Look, if you don't go tonight, he's just gonna come looking for you again. I say we just get it over with.
He knows I know.
Mom, he's not gonna do anything to you, all right? Because I'll be there. Let's just go see what he has to say.
Now, if I'm being honest, I don't know if I would be so gung-ho on going to a person's house after knowing or at least having a strong inkling that they killed their wife, and I know I definitely wouldn't be okay with my kid being involved. Now, catching up with the ladies, they're out for dinner at the hotel as they learn that Fabian will be their entertainment for the evening. Now, it's pretty clear that there's an uncomfortable tension between Jacqueline and Laurie after the sleepover situation, and we see Laurie is ready for the drinks for the night and she wants to get her mind off of everything that's transpired. Now, back in Bangkok, I feel bad for Frank, y'all, because he's really trying his best to be the fake director who claimed to have seen and studied Shatala's previous films, but man, Rick really screwed him over by not giving him much to work with. I mean, he couldn't give Frank a title of one of her movies or one of the characters she played. I mean, it was a really shitty recon on Rick's end. Now, it didn't take much, but we see Rick convinces Jim for them to have a solo conversation elsewhere about how he handled business in Thailand for all these years. Now, by the ease in which Jim agreed to have this side conversation with a complete stranger, at that point, I was certain that the Hollingers were fully aware that this was all a ruse, and it was just a matter of time before they called them out on their BS, but by the way things play out in this episode, that never happened and they completely seem to be gullible about the whole situation. Now, in Jim's den, we see him sharing his experiences with doing business in Thailand and how when he was younger, he had to do these reckless type of things. He had this level of hunger and determination and how he didn't let things stop him from getting things done and how he handled things when things got difficult.
You hit a roadblock, you had a lot of options.
And if somebody got in your way, made your life difficult.
Lots of ways to take care of that. I'm more careful now.
Now, it's pretty clear that there's two conversations going on within this scene. One, we have Jim, who doesn't really take much from the conversation they're having about business in Thailand, but then you look at Rick, and we know that all of this has a deeper meaning for him, and especially the answers he's getting from Jim, and you can just see that it's making him more upset because of the tone in which Jim is answering him, and also there's this sense of carelessness from his past that we can see is clearly affecting Rick. Now, as he's getting more upset, we notice that Rick is repositioning the gun from his jacket to his waist. Now, as the Rattlers arrive to the party, we see Chloe immediately asks where Lachlan is, and you can see she's slightly disappointed that he wasn't there, and we find out why that is a little bit later in the episode. Now, Saxon continues to try to get Chelsea to like him as they talk for a bit, and here's where we finally get the backstory about how Chelsea and Rick first met, as she explains what she saw in him.
First day we met, he told me his whole life story, and I just knew we were meant to be together. He has this sadness. It really touches me. I want to heal him. It's like we're in this yin and yang battle. I'm hope, and Rick is pain, and eventually one of us will win.
Again, using the analogy of how the physical fight was shown and cut throughout the episode, here we learn that Chelsea is in her own fight. She's trying to fight for Rick's hope and happiness, but he can't seem to accept anything peaceful because of the battle within himself about what happened to him as a kid growing up without his parents. Now, hearing Chelsea's reasonings to being with Rick, I think we've all kind of known her why to a certain extent for most of this season, and maybe we know people, or hell, maybe we are those people who have a similar mindset to where they think they can fix people that are dealing with their own issues. Now, personally, I find those type of people that want to fix people, and I can be guilty of that. I have done that in the past. I honestly find that to be a slightly toxic trait to have. I say that because those individuals, and I'll throw myself in that bin, most likely knows whoever that person they're trying to fix most of the time aren't going to be emotionally available, and getting to them can take so much time and effort, and really getting to their actual core values will be a struggle. Again, I've been victim of that. I've played that game before and I failed at it. So now the question is, why even put yourself through that draining process? At least Chelsea seems to be aware that there's a possibility she's going to lose that battle with Rick, and it could be more foreshadowing for him being the reason she could be this season's dead character. But let me know in the comments if you all can relate to Chelsea, or if you've been her at some point, or you are her now, and you can understand where she's coming from. Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now, during that conversation, we see Timothy and Gary share a brief conversation, and while that's happening, we see Saxon watches from afar and watches his dad drinking as he pulls his dad aside to have a talk with him. Meanwhile, Gary notices that Belinda has arrived, yet another set of characters having their own battle to deal with. Now, on their date, we see Gaitok tells Mook that he's not going to be getting the promotion that she believed that he was getting. He also tells her that he's not going to be a bodyguard either because he was told he's too soft and he doesn't have the killer instinct, and he seems to agree with that. He tells her how he didn't instinctually want to fight back during the robbery because of his Buddhist beliefs and how it's condemned to use violence, as we heard earlier in this episode from the monk. Now, Mook, on the other hand, shares how she believes the opposite and how it should be in his best interest to embrace the harshness of the world, and that he shouldn't be afraid of using violence if it's needed in his job. Now, she seems to be disappointed by his lack of assertion and his drive to be more ambitious and having to do what it takes to move around in this world. Again, there's been a charm, there's a cuteness, there's a friendliness that we've seen from Mook all season long, and just knowing how popular Lisa is in real life, I'm starting to think that the whole big shootout that we know is coming will most likely have her being a key part of it, and maybe we'll see a more violent side of that particular character as well. Now, back at dinner, I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't spend much time with Fabian's singing debut, but to replace that, we got to see the polite gloves being taken off as Laurie finally gets to the root of her problems about the Jacqueline situation, and she tells Jacqueline that the whole situation makes her not trust her. Now, Laurie mentions how Jacqueline threw herself at Dave at her wedding over a decade ago, and based on Kate's response, Dave is her current husband. Now, the conversation gets a little bit more personal, and it switches up on Laurie as Jacqueline calls her out for not allowing her life to get better, and she even talks about how she just accepts things without much pushback on her life, and we even see Kate throws in her 2 cents and she agrees with Jacqueline's assessment about her.
If you always choose the short stick, is it bad luck? Are you life's victim? Or are you doing it to yourself?
And, when you know someone long enough, you do start to see certain patterns. The source of your disappointment changes, but the constant is you're always disappointed.
Now, Laurie feels backed in a corner, and she swings back, and she calls them out by telling Kate that she's fake, and she pretends her life is perfect. She also tells Jacqueline that she's vain, and she's also selfish. Now, Laurie's fed up with the both of them, and we watch as she decides to leave the table, and she wants to head off to the fight instead of spending the rest of the night with her so-called friends. Now, at this point in the show, we've all come to expect at least one standout funny moment from Victoria, and we get this here, as she wants to be a hero and save the young woman she met back on the boat from the older man that she's dating. Now, Victoria offers to bring this young lady back to North Carolina with her so she can introduce her to some more respectable men for her to date. It was almost like Victoria was trying to pimp her out of what she believes isn't a good relationship for her to currently be in. Now, meanwhile, we see Belinda agrees to go inside to speak to Greg privately. Now, surprisingly, we see Greg finally comes clean, to a certain extent, about admitting to remembering Belinda and his ties to Tanya, as he tells her,
Tanya talked about you a lot. I always felt guilty that she didn't start that business with you. And I know that she'd want you to have some money to do that.
I can't lie, this was a very smart move by Gary Gregg, a very smart move to make his problem a solution to Belinda's problem, as he offers Belinda $100,000 to finally start in her business, and in exchange, Belinda will let go of any knowledge of knowing him and letting him live in peace. Now, Belinda wants to sleep on this before making any decisions, and you can tell that Greg is shocked that she didn't say yes to his offer. As Belinda finds her son, and she wants to leave this party immediately, as we see Greg watches them from afar. So, question, if this was you, and whether it was $100,000 for a startup business that you always wanted to get going, or it was a down payment for your dream car, or your dream house, or to pay for your kids' tuition, or to pay off your debts, or whatever desire you have, are you taking that bribe, or that hush money, or are you doing what she did and potentially risking him taking measures to ensure his secret is safe, which could lead to her and her son, both of them, being harmed? Let me know what would you do in this situation in the comments below. Now, last week, Timothy saw firsthand just how helpless his wife would be without their money, and now he gets another example, but this time it comes from his son, as Saxon wants assurances that everything at work is going okay, and if it's not, he believes he's not going to have anything else to offer in life.
Dad, I don't have anything else but this. I don't have any interests. I don't have any hobbies. Okay, if I'm not a success, then I'm nothing. And I can't handle being nothing. I put my whole life into this basket, into your basket, Dad. So if something's up, just put something up.
Now, Timothy lies again straight into his son's face about what's really happening back home. But again, the important thing to note is that Timothy gets to see just how little of a killer instinct some of his family members don't have to survive without their money, which just adds more fuel to my theory that I shared in my last breakdown of Timothy convincing himself that by killing his family, he's doing them a favor by protecting them from what's back home. Now, back at the Hollingers, we see Frank and Chatala watching her old tapes of her performing while dancing and singing to both folk and rap music, and it being a mixture of MC Hammer meets Peter Pan, as Frank says. Now, during this, we see Jim talks about how he spoils both of his daughters, as Rick finally comes clean about why he's here, and he goes into the first time he heard of Jim's name.
I was 10 years old when my mother was dying. Gloria Hatchet. Name ring a bell?
Gloria Hatchet.
Now, at this point, Rick pulls out the gun and he points it in Jim's face and he moves closer to him. Now, Rick holds back from pistol whipping Jim, and we learn why he does that a little bit later in the episode, but he decides to flip the chair that Jim is sitting in and he falls to the floor as we watch Rick immediately runs away with Frank. Now, I have a few thoughts about that scene. When Rick mentioned his mother's name, you notice how Jim acted as he either never heard of that woman ever before in his entire life, or he remembered her and didn't remember her having a husband, and this could point to the theory that a lot of you all have, which is that Jim is Rick's actual father. Now, another thing about that scene, I'm going to be honest with you all, I thought it was extremely anticlimactic, and I thought it was kind of lame to just watch Rick flip over his chair and just leave him there for Jim to get his lick back on Rick eventually. Again, I just feel like Rick didn't think any of this over properly. Like, does he not remember that his girlfriend is currently staying at Jim's hotel and could easily get all of his information from the records that they have on file? And again, leaving Chelsea at risk. Again, I just gotta say, I feel like the whole plan that Rick came up with is just so idiotic. From the director angle and giving him little to no information to how he handled this Jim confrontation, I definitely think the third bad luck that Chelsea has been speaking of will come to fruition, and it's gonna be in the form of Jim getting his revenge. Or again, going back to you all's theories about Jim being Rick's father, maybe he deep down inside knows that this is his son, and maybe they're going to have a more peaceful confrontation, but things are going to go sideways because maybe Rick and Jim and his bodyguards get into some big confrontation, which may lead to the big shootout. Now, we finally get to see the actual fight, but more importantly, we get to see our main characters in attendance. Again, we see Mook is talking to Gaitok about the natural nature of humans to fight. While they're talking, we see that Laurie is in the crowd and she's sitting next to Valentin, and we see his friends Vlad and Alexei arrive. And as I predicted all the way back in my breakdown of episode 2, check out this clip. So going back to Valentin, it wouldn't surprise me if there is a connection between him and the robbers, and I wouldn't be surprised if when we see Gaitok go to the fight that maybe the fighter is the one that was involved in the robbery, or at the very least, I bet Gaitok sees one of them at the fight and it'll be revealed that one of them were actually involved. As Gaitok looks around and he notices that Vlad was the same bald guy he saw from the robbery, and he pieces it together that Valentin must have had his head in the robbery as he distracted him, like I figured. Now the question is, what exactly will Gaitok do with this information? Will he bottle it up and take that to his grave, or will he have to tap into that killer instinct and he's going to confront them, or, as we'll discuss later, maybe another robbery happens and we're going to see Gaitok react in a more violent way. Now, as I've expressed in the past, I'm not the biggest Piper subplot fan of how they're handling it. It's just not as compelling to me as the other stories, but we do get a few scenes at the monastery in this penultimate episode, and again, it just didn't move the needle for me at all. But one of the last few scenes that we get within that subplot, we see the siblings settling in, and we see Piper hearing from Lachlan about what he thinks about this experience, and he thinks that it's all pretty great. Now, to her surprise, Lachlan tells her that he actually wants to stay in Thailand. He doesn't want to lean into his darkness, and he doesn't want to return home ever, and he wants to stay with Piper. Again, she's at a loss of words, and she's not all that excited about the news as she leaves her brother alone to leave him with his thoughts. Again, the whole Piper subplot has been my least favorite aspect of this season, but I do think the particular scene that we just talked about speaks more about Lachlan and him yet again being rejected by one of his siblings. Look, Lachlan's lost. He's not sure about his sexual preferences. He's not sure about his beliefs. And twice now, he tried to go down the path that his brother was on, but he got rejected. And now he tried to go down the religious road with Piper, but again, he got rejected. And he just doesn't have a clue on who he wants to be. Now look, this doesn't excuse what happened between Lachlan and his brother, but there's a level of understanding that this 18-year-old, we've all been 18-year-old, we've all been kids not knowing what we want to do with our life, not to the extent of what we see in the show, obviously, but again, he's looking for guidance from this very dysfunctional family, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of Lachlan in the finale, and if he'll be the Ratliff member that ends up dying. Now, from one lost Ratliff member to another, back at the party, we learn why Chelsea was a bit upset about Lachlan's absence, as she shares with both Saxon and Chelsea that her and Gary had a heart-to-heart about his very messed up childhood fantasy.
When he was a kid, his parents used to have loud sex, like all the time, and they would leave their door open. He would then stand outside their door and just watch his dad go to town on his mom.
We learned that Greg Gary became obsessed with the idea that the women that he dated were cheating on him, and he hoped to catch them in the act. Which leads to Chelsea inviting Saxon to stay to have sex with her while Gary watches and fulfills his dreams and trying to tap into his childhood trauma. Whether it's Greg Gary or Chloe or Chelsea who's encouraging this to happen, which is just wild to me, but I got a good laugh out of that scene, and I got even a bigger laugh when the camera pans to Gary watching as he's smirking at Saxon, hoping that he says yes. So that answers the question to what Gary wanted from Chloe from last week's episode. Now, ultimately, we see Saxon at the moment declines this offer as he decides to leave. Now, that reveal wasn't as crazy nor as great or as wild as Frank's sexual fantasies, but at the same time, it was still pretty damn hilarious and maybe as equally freaky as hell.
Hey, run for your life, freaky ass nigga, he a 69 god.
Now, speaking of Frank, we see him and Rick living in the moment as Rick tells Frank how he couldn't even hit Jim because he wasn't this big bad boogeyman that he made up in his head to be, but instead he was just this old frail man, and after their little exchange, we see Rick's got the closure that he wanted. Now to celebrate, we see Frank invites Rick to have some drinks and to have some fun with the night like they used to do back in the day. Now back with Belinda, we see Zion encouraging his mom to take the money, but Belinda doesn't want to have anything to do with a murderer. Zion tries to remind his mom what she could do with that money, but more importantly, he reminds her that if she doesn't come to terms with Greg, she'll or both of them will most likely end up dead like Tanya. Now I can't lie, Zion was speaking facts, but I understand Belinda's position and her feelings on tying herself to a murderer and knowing that she took money and that stayed on her conscience, and also who's to say by accepting that money that Greg won't end up holding that over her, or even worse, he still might decide to have her killed. To me, this is the perfect definition of being between a rock and a hard place. Now, we continue to get more fighting or more disagreeing going on as we see Kate and Jacqueline aren't on the same page of what happened at the dinner with Laurie.
It's fine. I'll be the bad guy. I'm used to it.
Now, admittedly, I know we still got the finale to look forward to with this particular plot with the ladies and them having their big blowout fight, but I was hoping that at this point in the season, that big fight between them would have happened already, and the fallout would have been seen in the finale, but obviously it looks like that isn't the case, that we're going to be seeing both of those things happening in next week's episode. At least I hope that's the case. Now, after Gary's get together, we see Saxon keeps at it, and he wants to prove to Chelsea that she's got the wrong impression of him as he wants to show her. As he manages to get in her room, and we see her trying to show him to tap into more of himself, to tap more into his mind, into his spirit, and his body. And look, we know Saxon. He tries to be slick, and he tries to make a move on her, but she peeps game, and she has him leave, and she remains loyal to her relationship with Rick, and she tries to call him, but yet again, she has no luck at doing so. Which, speaking of, we see Rick and Frank tapping into their old times and having a good time at the club, and eventually they take the party to their room with a bunch of ladies, drugs, and alcohol, and we see Rick is smiling. Now, was that smile from the whole situation that went down with Jim? Was that a smile about what he's currently doing? He's having fun with his friend, or is it a mixture of both? And will Rick do the opposite of what Chelsea did, and will he cheat on her in this moment? Now, after being called out for not sleeping with Valentin, we see Laurie not missing out on her second chance at getting some, as we see that she's having sex with Alexei. Which is kind of funny because remember Jacqueline mentioning her bad luck with picking men? Well, we see that happening yet again. Now look, I'm happy Laurie got it in. We don't know how long it's been, but it seemed like it was a while, and again, I'm happy for her. But still, her deciding to go to this dude's house that she just met a day or two ago was so stupid in my opinion, and also so dangerous of a decision that she made. And I get it. She's trying to prove a point to herself, but also to her friends, but again, that could have ended really badly, and it almost did. As we see them sharing pillow talk together, and we see Alexei going over his sob story about his mother being stuck in his home country and that she's also sick. It doesn't stop there because he needs $10,000 to cover her costs of coming to where he is and taking care of her, and this fool asks Laurie if she can help. Now in comes the girl we met who was arguing with him at the club as Laurie has to sneak out through the back window. But before she leaves and gets smacked in the head and the face while doing so, while she was hiding in the closet, you all would notice that she saw a bunch of jewelry on his drawer. It's a pretty safe bet. Get it? Safe bet because of the robbery. Anyway, it's a pretty safe bet that that's the same jewelry that was stolen from the hotel. And this makes Alexi the guy with the gun that actually stole the jewelry. Now, based on that little story she gave Laurie, it seems like they are definitely playing these ladies the whole time and running some type of scheme to get money off of them. Now, the question is, did Valentin sleep with Jacqueline to get leverage over her? Will this be a situation where he's going to try to blackmail her and maybe reveal that he recorded them and them having sex that night, and he's going to leak the tape online if she doesn't give him the $10,000 that Alexi asked for? Now, this feels a bit repetitive, but we end this episode the same way we ended it before, where we see Timothy continuing to having dreams about killing his family by shooting both Victoria and Saxon dead before shooting himself. But I will admit, this time around it is a little bit different because he actually seems to want to follow through with that fantasy as he goes to look for the gun, but of course we know it's gone, and he now knows that because he can't find it, and now he has to come up with another way to end his and his family's life. Again, my working theory is that he's going to get those poisonous seeds that was spoken of by Pam back in episode 1 of this season, and they've made it a point to show the importance of Saxon's blender. The reason I bring up the blender is it wouldn't surprise me if we see Timothy making a smoothie for his whole family to drink and trying to kill them in the process. But I think to make matters worse, I think he's going to make those smoothies for his family. He's going to offer to his family, but at the very last minute, he's going to get a very important call. We're going to see Pam coming in being like, listen, Timothy, you got to call. You got to take it. They've been calling all morning. It's a terrible accent. But anyway, she's going to come into the room. He's going to take the call. He's going to find out from his lawyer that the whole case was taken care of by the grace of God, right? We've been seeing him praying. He's been wanting to sign. He got his sign. But the whole theme of this season is patience, being calm, sitting down with your thoughts and having that level of patience. Unfortunately, he didn't wait long enough. And as he gets good news, it's going to be too late because his family is going to already have drinking the poison. Now, if I'm being honest, at the time of this recording, I've seen the episode a few times. The first time I watched it, I immediately thought it was a pretty lackluster episode, minus a couple moments here and there, but on a rewatch, I found myself enjoying it a little bit more. I still think for a penultimate episode that didn't really excite me for the finale, but I do see the underlining theme about the inner fight that all these characters are dealing with and how they're channeling all this negativity in a bad way. Whether it's a Rick or a Laurie or a Jacqueline or a Lachlan or a Saxon or a Timothy, all those be an example of characters that are bottling all their problems away and it coming out and affecting those closest to them. I still think Piper's subplot is the weakest plot of this show, but it'll be interesting to see how Lachlan's rejection plays into the finale. Everything going on with Belinda and the Greg situation makes me very nervous because I don't want anything to happen to her or her son. And again, I think Gaitok is going to try to tap into his killer instinct, and there has to be some type of big payoff or reveal involving Mook. Now, if my schedule allows it, I may make a separate final prediction video before the finale, so put any of your questions or theories you all have for me that I can share in the video, put those in the comments below. Also, let me know how you all felt about the episode in general. With this being a second to last episode, what were your favorite moments that you didn't enjoy? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, full transparency, I want to bring this up, but HBO let me know that the finale will not be available to critics like myself. Like, for example, they sent this very episode this past Monday, and I was able to look at it in advance and make this video for you all, but I figured that was going to be the case, that they wasn't going to give the finale to the critics because they probably want to keep the spoilers from getting out, and I'm okay with that. Which, to that point, let's keep the tradition going. What I mean by that is, if you've been watching all my previous breakdowns for the White Lotus, I've always had a live watch party or a live reaction after the finale, and I was thinking of doing the same thing for this season's finale. So let me know if you all would want to join a live stream and you would want me to host either a watch party for the finale that we can all watch together live, or you all would want me to host a live after show to discuss the finale, and then the following day I'll have a full breakdown going over everything. Vote which one you would want me to do for next week's finale in the comments below. So with all that said, there you have it. That is the end of my breakdown of the 7th episode of the 3rd season of The White Lotus. If you all are still here at this point in the video, thank you so much for the continued support. Do me a favor and put in the comments right now, hashtag Piper no. If you all enjoyed this week's breakdown, hit that like button, share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And if this is your first time watching one of my videos or listening, because this is available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the different podcast platforms out there, if this is your first time, thank you again for watching. Hope you had a good time. Consider sticking around by either subscribing to my YouTube channel or subscribing to my podcast. And also, if you want to take the support even further, you can join my channel memberships, which can be found in the description of this very video. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next breakdown.